This is Akashvani. In the weekly program Current Affairs, now we bring you a discussion on India Energy Week, catalyzing India's energy transition goals. The participants are Utpal Bhaskar, energy expert, and Vishwa Mohan, environmental journalist. Omvesh Upadhyay, anchor, is moderating the discussion.
India is demonstrating leadership and emerging as a clean energy solutions provider. In recent years, India is pioneering a new model of economic development which is believed that it can avoid the carbon-intensive approaches that many countries have pursued in the past and provide a blueprint for other developing economies. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi inaugurated India Energy Week 2014 in Goa this week on February 6th. And today to talk more on this, we are joined by two senior journalists, Mr. Utpal Bhaskar and Mr. Vishwa Mohan. I welcome you both in the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we delve deeper into the conversation, my first question is to you, Utpalji, that can you please provide an overview of India Energy Week 2024 and its significance in India's larger energy landscape to our listeners?
So as we are aware that India is the third largest energy consumer. We are also the third largest oil consumer. India happens to be the fourth largest LNG importer. And also, when you look purely from a refining point of view, we are the refining hub in this part of the world. India Energy Week, interestingly, also comes at a time when the demand for fuel, when you look at the global energy demand, it's petering out. China is expected to have a hard landing. In such a scenario, which is the only market which is growing in this form and manner. So that is the context of this. Obviously, this is only the second edition of India Energy Week. The government wants to make it as mega on the lines of the Abu Dhabi International Petroleum Exhibition and Conference, ADIPEC. And given the kind of the attendance which it saw, 17 global CEOs, large companies in the fray, it also sets up a stage for India to showcase what its energy transition journey is all about, gas being the intermittent fuel that the government is banking upon. And also about if conventional hydrocarbons have to have a playbook around, India is the place to be.
Absolutely. And in that regard, I want to know from you, Utpalji, that what particularly India is trying to achieve in catalyzing India's energy transition goals.
So if you look at what is India's playbook right now, obviously India has gone ahead and made this commitments at the global stage. We need to reduce emissions. Also, renewable will play a very important role of energy mix. Apart from the push for solar and wind and green hydrogen, I think the government is looking at ensuring energy availability, affordability, sustainability, but not compromising on energy security. So one of the key things that India has been showcasing, both at India Energy Week and elsewhere in the world, is the ethanol blending program. So 12% ethanol blending, it happened 5 months ahead of the target. Also now the government has revised the 20% ethanol blending by 5 years to 2025. And obviously going forward, it will be all EVs and emission-free fuel. However, given that the size and the expanse of our economy, also the economy needs to grow from the Indian government's point of view, there's a fine calibration that they're trying to do. Not very easy, given that a significant part of our energy mix is still conventional sources. When you look at energy, I also include coal, which is a part of a large, it provides the base load for India's electricity demand as well. But there are new technologies that is being talked about. There are new focus areas, green hydrogen being one of them. And green mobility is also the way going forward.
As you briefly talked about the challenges that are in front of India while trying to achieve that energy transition, I want to know from you that how India's long-term policy planning align with its energy transition goals, if you can tell our listeners in detail. And so that then after that we can bring Vishwa Mohanji to talk about the climate challenges.
True, and obviously all of this, given that economy of our size and the kind of the ambition and aspiration around it, a strong growth in the Indian economy, also population demographic, there is, and all of this needs to be fueled by energy. As part of this, the approach has been, government broadly has divided into two parts. So one is what you can do on the demand side management, and also what you can do on the supply side management as well. So obviously, large portions of the country are still, when you look at from an E&P perspective, it has still a lot to be explored in this country. There was a time when the global energy majors used to say that there is not much oil and gas in this country, but there have been significant discoveries as well. KG-D6 have recently come online. Of course, there's also the truth of the matter is there are fields which are aging. So, for example, we have large fields, but some of them are also depleting. So one is obviously on what you can do on the E&P part of it. Also, from a demand side perspective, how can there be more energy efficient usage? For example, vehicles more energy efficient as well. On the green mobility side, there is an electric vehicle play, but then again, what is the conundrum there is given the lithium, and obviously lithium is one part of the battery play. There can be other technologies as well, because the growing concern on lithium also happens to be the lithium supplies get cornered by a particular country, which then also has its own strategic ramifications. Lithium is found in places where some of our competitors are already, when I say us, I mean as a country, most of these supplies are being secured as we are talking about it. So that is another part of the play. Obviously, solar is a very easy fix. India has a significant solar portfolio. There is a growing demand as well. Solar also happens to, it can be scalable very soon. It doesn't take much time to set up a solar power project. Also, now, while land-based wind projects have done, it took off very well, but there has been some kind of it's not to the level so desired, and as it happens, but the government also wants to push for that. Also, there has been offshore wind projects are being talked about right now. And then, given that in all of this, obviously this transition has to be made, this journey has to be traveled. In all of this, gas will play a very important role. That will become it will be kind of be a bridge between this conventional, which is purely pure play hydrocarbons, coal, to this green technology, which happens to be all the things that I've talked about right now.
Here I would like to bring Vishnu Mohanji in the conversation. Vishnu Mohanji, when we talk about the challenges in front of us, as Utpalji was talking about how long-term policy planning should be done, how it is progressing right now, but in terms of the challenges of climate change and environmental cost, how do you assess the situation right now for India?
When you look at the climate change point of view, in the energy transition, renewable energy switch is very important factor. And unless and until we switch over to renewable energy in a big way, we won't be able to handle whatever we promised in terms of our climate change goals. For this, we need to understand that India has been following this renewable energy path for the last 2 decades. But since 2015, ever since India promised under the Paris Agreement that the India's renewable energy share in the overall electricity would be the 40%. Since then, India has been following this path quite vigorously. After that, India also updated its goal on renewable energy in 2022 when it said 50% of the total electricity mix would be renewable energy. So renewable energy is critical to India's approach towards moving to a non-fossil fuel energy sources. And when we talk about the non-fossil fuel energy sources, we have to go towards solar, wind energy, even the nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is also very important when you talk about the non-fossil fuel energy. Though there has been safety issue and there has been number of issues around the nuclear power plant. So the government first trying to explore the solar and wind, and obviously nuclear is a key component of it. From the climate point of view, from the environment point of view, the focus is to move towards renewable and reduce its dependence on coal and fossil fuel. I must tell you that even the gas is also a fossil fuel energy. So it also has carbon footprints. So in any case, we have to move towards the sources of energy which doesn't emit carbon. So in that point of view, we have to move towards non-fossil fuel energy. And for this solar, wind, hydro means only we have to go for the small hydro, because large hydro has its own problem, own challenges, environmental challenges, and also nuclear after taking all the safety measures.
He was briefly talking about EVs. How do you see, Utpalji, the NEMM mission to incentivize the adoption of EVs, extending the scheme until this year? So along with the commitment that a big chunk of India's mobility sector would be dependent on EVs for both private and commercial vehicles, how successful it could be in near future, and how is the progress right now?
So before I come to that, as Vishwan rightly pointed out, gas, of course, it's a hydrocarbon, but what is the lesser evil that is out there? And mind you, when we talk about a country of energy demand as huge as India, any abrupt shift will also have a cascading effect down the line. And it will have not only an impact on this country and the economy, and also at a time when look around us, what's happening. Global economy is in doldrums right now. There are external events which are threatening global trade. There are 2 wars being fought at this point of time. So yes, so what is the lesser evil? And that's the reason why that gas play comes into effect. Coming back to your question about electric mobility. Now, also that needs to be framed in a manner that it has a minimal impact on environment. So it doesn't make sense that when coal-based electricity is being used to drive electric vehicles. So a pure play solution that will be a very easy theoretically would be that electricity generated from non-fossil fuel sources drives our electric vehicle mobility program. And that's a debate which has been raging across as well. If you look at the number of registration of electric vehicles in this country, it has exponentially gone up. I think the recent ongoing session in the parliament as well, this question was being asked. The number of vehicles which have been registered, electric vehicles vis-a-vis what was the number earlier, and there's an exponential increase there. Obviously, any program when it starts off and when you need to encourage people to make this switch, obviously EVs come with a thing called a range anxiety. Say, for example, if you're taking a vehicle out, not many vehicles and the ones which are available are pretty expensive. How do you bring down the cost of such electric vehicles? One of the answers is obviously the government needs to play a role to incentivize, and there were all kind of programs, which is even the FAME missions have been, as in obviously FAME 1 didn't take out very well, it didn't take off very well. FAME 2 came into play. There have been also other questions about FAME as well. Some of the market participants tried to game the system and all of that happened. But also the truth of the matter is that markets are something which decide which technology will take off. So also given the scale, and if there is anywhere in this world, China has done it in a very interesting fashion and form. Chinese government played a very important role, and obviously then it took off from there. Also, India is also at a cusp. If you look at any major automobile manufacturer worth their, pardon my pun, but if there is any Indian auto manufacturer worth their gasoline or whichever fuel they have been using in their vehicles, everyone has an EV play ready. Some of them so much so that they have realized the writing is on the wall. If you look at the way that the buyers of these electric vehicles are, the young people who are buying vehicles today, and climate does play a very important role in there while they make that purchasing decision. And mind you, at the end of the day, as I've said, markets will play a very important role in this. The moment, and we have seen it happening in some categories, where an internal combustion engine vehicle prices are at parity with EV prices as well. And then it's a very easy fix after that.
Absolutely. And Mohanji, when we talk about how important it is to build EV ecosystem so that a larger scale of adoption is there in near future, how challenging it is if we compare it in terms of environmental cost as well, like the batteries should be that durable, and also what about e-waste?
If we are moving towards the EV and if we produce the electricity for EV using coal, that won't make sense. So there are 2-3 challenges I must tell you. First, we have to produce electricity using renewable energy sources. Second, since we know that the renewable energy can't provide you round the clock electricity, for this you need storage capacity. Storage technology is there in the world, but this is very expensive. And unless and until India and other countries come out with a common goal to provide these storage technology to other countries on cheaper rate, it won't be possible to go fully towards the renewable energy sources. So we are talking about the EV, but we need to go to the source of the energy, source of the electricity that will feed into the electric vehicle systems. And for this, storage is needed. So this is the first big challenge. The storage is the first big challenge. Storage technology is there, but India doesn't have that access to those technologies. All the developed countries have these technologies, but due to the IPR regime, they won't be able to share those technology to the developing countries who can switch over to renewable energy or who can switch over to less expensive storage capacity. So in terms of EV, this is the biggest challenge. And I think one will also have to look at when you transition from fossil fuel to non-fossil fuel energy, you have to keep in mind that you can't compromise with the energy security. You have to provide electricity to nearly 300 million people who still don't get electricity. So for this, you cannot switch over the entire fossil fuel sources and switch over to renewable energy. So for this, country like India will have to have a judicious mix of fossil fuel energy sources and non-fossil fuel energy sources. And this applies to all the sectors. And when you talk about EVs, this is very critical for this sector as well.
Absolutely. And what I understand from both of you is that the switch cannot be done overnight, and there is also this equal share of contribution, not just nationally from India, but also subnational contributions from different states. Which brings me to my next question, that if we talk about how well India is performing in achieving the nationally determined goals, there is also this significant subnational action that has been occurred over time in recent years. Nearly 20 states have recently finalized or notified EV policies to build a stronger policy framework to resolve the challenges which we are talking about, like EV cost, affordable and better sustainability, and also the infrastructure development overall, like charging stations and all that. So in this regard, I want to ask you, Utpalji, how do you assess the state of this subnational adoption of EV in India, and also how they are trying to regionally address these challenges about which Mohanji was talking?
It absolutely is. At the end of the day, center can only come up with a policy, and a lot of that, lot of work needs to be done on the ground, and that will happen in the state. In fact, as we have observed, some states have always been the lead bearers in this, or torch bearers to say, in the sense there are states which have done a lot of work. The foremost puzzle in the EV play happens to be charging. Right now, India has got around 12,000, if my memory serves me right, 12,500 or 600 odd charging stations. For the entire EV, so tomorrow, if you are taking your electric vehicle out, you should have this assurance that once even the top end of the spectrum would be a vehicle that will give you around, say, whatever, if it's 500 kilometer on single charge, it needs to be as available as an ATM machine is. Now, there is a push which is happening for that. States have been doing it, but there's only so much. And there are also automobile companies which are partnering with states. There are companies which have also found that different kind of models are being evolving in this play. There are companies which, for example, there was some time back, there was this concern around fast charging and slow charging. There were also concerns around whether one kind of a charging point will charge all vehicles. So as a market matures, these questions start getting answered. And as I said earlier, at the end of it, it is all about look at where else in the world will a significant part of a population will change its vehicle from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle. There's no other country in the world which offers this part of. And purely speaking from the point of the view of the business, obviously they're not going to do this on a pro bono basis. Profit is what is underlining. But the scale that this country provides, it is absolutely mind-boggling. It's as good as when the internal combustion engine was invented.
And if we talk about the opportunities or the potential, how significant role the private sector led innovation can do in this, and also what are the opportunities for investment in India in renewable sector?
So for example, when you talk about renewables, so one of the concerns which has always been around is, does India have enough solar modules? Do we have this blending blocks in place? And the government realized this, and that's the reason why this PLI scheme came into play. Now we see that there are large solar modules, manufacturing facilities being set up in this country. And why even module? The idea is to go back to, as in the very building blocks of it. So people are trying to capture value at each stage of this development. So manufacturing is one part of it. Then I'm only talking about solar right now. Then obviously you set up these large scale solar parks. And then there was a time when, I'm sure the listeners will remember, there was a time when the prices of both solar and wind, because these were active competitive bids which were happening. And almost everyone had participated in them, and the solar and wind tariffs had fallen down. So much so that they became as comparable or even cheaper to coal-fueled power generation. And therein we have seen the large, if you look at the large pension funds, if you look at large sovereign wealth funds, if you look at large private equity players, they are like large capital, which has come into that space. And that is what, because they realize this is a kind of a return which no other country might be able to offer you at this point of time, when the global economy itself is the large question marks around it. That was on the solar part. We have seen similarly the same story unfolding in wind as well. Now, say investment opportunities is the question that you asked. Say what is happening in the green hydrogen play right now. Electrolyzers. India needs to build this electrolyzers. There's no other way that this green hydrogen playbook will come to fruition. And we have seen the John Cockerells of the world. Those kind of companies are coming in to build this electrolyzers in this country. We have seen domestic majors getting into manufacturing, because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for a transition this big, huge, to benefit the interests of some other country from where it can be imported. So you will see that going forward, and these are multi-billion dollar opportunities. The world majors are here. They are already looking at it. And at the end of the day, then you need to have capital for all of this to come into reality. And capital is available. There are large funds, banks. I'm talking about both equity on the equity side as well and on the debt side as well. There's this large companies, investors with big fat checkbooks ready to sign off on those checks.
And as you briefly talked about the green hydrogen and National Green Hydrogen Mission, a very aspirational mission of India. So as an estimate, we know that it might create around 6 lakh jobs by 2030. Vishnu Mohanji, my question is to you that how significant option green hydrogen mission can provide to India, and can we say that it can lead us to be a pioneer in terms of developing economy with green hydrogen?
Yeah, of course. Unless we produce our own electrolyzer, as Utpal pointed out, there is no point importing the stuff and producing or going towards this source of energy. So unless and until we invest in research and development and come out with our own electrolyzer, it won't help. So, and it's not only applies to hydrogen. He also pointed out about the solar. Unless and until we have the building blocks, we can't depend on the photovoltaic cells from China to build our solar energy capacity. So it will not help India in that sense. So whenever we come towards our increasing the renewable energy capacity, we have to analyze our own capacity in terms of providing the resources, providing the critical materials, and then move towards the renewable energy sources. And that's why whenever these kind of discussion comes into the play during the climate negotiations, India is very careful about. India insists that obviously the country will move towards the renewable, but how it will move towards the renewable energy, how this transition takes place without affecting the workforce involved in the fossil fuel industries, that route only can help India in achieving its transition energy goal. So the point is, India will have to move towards renewable energy without sacrificing the job prosperity, job aspects in the fossil fuel sector. So the country will have to transition towards it very carefully, trained and skill the manpower so that they can move towards renewable energy without losing their jobs. So these are the challenges: storage, how to transition without affecting the jobs, and it comes into the play whether it talks about the EV, hydrogen mission, solar energy. Everywhere we have to be very careful about the way we are transitioning.
And here, Vishnu Mohanji, if we talk about India's seriousness in terms of adopting dependency over renewable energy sources, we have National Green Hydrogen Mission. We heard about PM Sarvodaya Yojana, Kusum Saubhagya Yojana that are helping to improve the agrarian value chain. What message does it deliver to the world about seriousness of India in terms of climate change?
If you look at the factual details, you can be very sure about the India's track record. India's track record in achieving its renewable energy sources and renewable energy target is fantastic. Whatever India promised in 2015 as part of the Paris Agreement goal. Secondly, when we promised about our national action, which we call nationally determined contribution, you remember that India promised to achieve the 40% of the total electricity capacity through non-fossil fuel energy sources. India promised it in 2015, and this was to be met by 2030. But India achieved it by 2023. In fact, by October 2023, India's total share in renewable energy share in total electricity mix was around 44%. Now India has updated its targets. It says the 50% of the total energy mix would come from the renewable energy. So India has not only promised, India has walked the talk. India has fulfilled its promise, not only in terms of renewable energy. Whatever the climate action targets India promised, India has achieved ahead of times. So in terms of 2015 targets, in terms of 2022 updates, India has been on track, and India will definitely fulfill its promises by 2030. An overall window available to India to go net carbon neutrality is India has nearly 44 years, because India has promised to achieve this by 2070. So definitely India has been on track. By 2050, India will achieve more, and by 2070, this is a long-term target, but still with the help of the current performance, you can say that whatever India promised at Global Forum, India has achieved it.
And Utpalji, in that regard, I want to take your views on the Global Biofuel Alliance, where 22 nations and 12 international organizations are joining to encourage the use of biofuels worldwide. How significant it is, and how India would try to lead from front in that as well.
If you look at what India did with a Global Biofuel Alliance, is something which is absolutely stunning. India showcased Global Biofuels Alliance also at the COP28, which happened in UAE. Apart from the small aside about lighting up Burj Khalifa with the GBA, how this alliance is structured. The founding members happen to be India, US and Brazil. It was launched at G20 Summit, which was hosted by Delhi. It has grown to, the last I remember, is around 22 member countries. And what does GBA does? It basically gives a message to OPEC plus grouping. And as it was expected, the Global Biofuel Alliance hasn't found any support from major conventional hydrocarbon producers such as Saudi Arabia and Russia. What it also means is India is offering an alternative. At the end of the day, while obviously all these climate emission targets need to be met, what it essentially does is you also need to give an alternative to the world. Global ethanol market, because there is a growing traction for biofuel. If you look at the global ethanol market, it is valued at around close to $100 billion. It was in 2022, expected to grow around 5.1%. The overall, in these three countries that I mentioned, USA, Brazil and India, USA contributes 52% to the overall production, Brazil 30% in India. And one of the conversations that we had picked up during our reportage was, today, why should not biofuel be traded in a similar manner as crude oil is traded? So what it essentially does is, India's position for negotiation becomes so strong. You have already offered this as an alternative to other countries. India being the champion for Global South, this will also see traction there. And not only adopting biofuels, recognize standards and code, identifying global best practices, and industry participation will play a very important part of it. So from where I am looking at it, Global Biofuel Alliance is absolutely a masterstroke. And as everything else goes, the proof is also about how well it gains traction over the coming days.
Indeed, and as we enter the very concluding stage of this program, I would like to take very brief comments from both of you on how India is progressing toward achieving its energy transitions goal. First from you, Utpalji, how do you see that?
There is, to put it very briefly, India has set up a very ambitious target, and it has to be also for the country of our size and scale. Anything that India does on its energy transition journey will have reverberations, will be felt directly or indirectly across the world. While the targets are very ambitious, also there is a certain form of effort and capital which has been deployed towards it as well. And as we have seen, there is global investors are looking at the space very intently. There are significant investments which has happened. There's a lot of FDI which is coming into the space. I feel that given this journey is going to be very interesting, and almost everyone is very intently watching it because it will have an impact on economies across the world as well.
Vishwa Mohanji, how do you see India's progress?
In fact, India believes that an environment and development can go hand in hand, so both can go together. And with these principles, whatever India has promised, India has following it and India has been on track. And I must tell you that as far as the energy goal, the renewable energy goal is concerned, India is definitely going to achieve it well on time and also set a benchmark for the world.
Very beautifully briefed by you, Vishwa Mohanji, that India is on its track. And with your insightful input, we conclude the program. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us today on Akashvani.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India Energy Week, catalyzing India's energy transition goals. The participants were Utpal Bhaskar, energy expert, and Vishwa Mohan, environmental journalist. Omvesh Upadhyay, anchor, was moderating the discussion. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 92890 94044.